Enzo Maresca and the hierarchy, who have been under a lot of pressure and criticism in their first couple of years since the takeover from Abramovich. But they appear to be getting things together, and people seem to resoundingly call it sort of madness. Well, there appears now to be some method in it, and they're moving in the right direction, with João Pedro very much at the forefront of that.
Yeah, 2 brilliant goals on his first start for his new club, Miguel. Is that the perfect way to announce yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's other than maybe getting a hat-trick, it's hard to see how it could have gone much better. Maybe a better setting. I have to say, from keeping some eye on the game, Chelsea were as good as they can be. They did what they needed. I thought it was quite a poor contest that didn't really reflect well on the competition, which has obviously been quite controversial. The idea that this was kind of, anyway, meaningful in determining a world champion was a bit odd, I have to say. It's still, so much of this tournament has felt like an exhibition. And it says a lot that we have to keep pointing to the money earned as some sort of justification for the event. But in that context, obviously, Chelsea, I mean, given that PSR and like the sale of the women's team and elements like this have been such a discussion under this ownership. Obviously, the money they take in for this is almost as crucial as whether they win it. And in the circumstances, Enzo Maresca's team did what they could. And yet, for João Pedro's progress, it was an important step. And to be fair, you know, as David mentioned there, given the strength of that attack, they're one of a few clubs now that actually feel like, maybe there's been a little bit of a sense in the Premier League over the past few years that it's only ever been 1 or maybe 2 clubs that have been at a strong point at once. Whereas now, I mean, Liverpool, obviously, the effects of the tragedy with Diogo Jota notwithstanding, their squad had been in very good shape, especially after the signing of Wirtz. Arsenal are strengthening a lot. City have already gone in this remarkable overhaul going back to January. And now Chelsea have so many options up front. As David says, it's going to be difficult to see who they pick. And it's also going to be interesting to see who is sold over the next 2 months. But yeah, so they feed into what suddenly looks like a very stacked top end of the Premiership.
It certainly does seem stacked. We've just seen the Sun's treatment of this story, the João factor, the wow factor. They've gone for that pun. So maybe I could do this as a sideline hustle, David. What do you make of Chelsea's chances for next season when we're seeing how cohesive they seem, which is now in effect their pre-season?
Well, they've got more options in that attack as well. Jamie Gittins is ineligible, having played for Dortmund before the transfer in this competition. I don't think they're done that yet either, because if, say, Noni Madueke departs, say, Christopher Nkunku, who's actually been playing quite well at the Club World Cup, and it will probably earn him a better move than maybe some had expected, then there could be some more incomings in that department. But if you look at the whole team, in response to your question, there are some weaknesses. There's still a bit of shakiness at the back, and let's see the true test when they play in the final, the weekend, against either PSG or Real Madrid. And still there's a feeling around Chelsea that they might not be able to win the biggest trophies without a really world-class goalkeeper. And Robert Sanchez wasn't that last season. They've got some other options, of course. There may be some departures from the goalkeeping department. And Penders is the one I think they've really got their eye on for the future, but he's not quite ready yet. So he'll probably spend a season on loan at somewhere like Strasbourg and then come in. So, you know, they looked before this tournament at Mike Maignan. That didn't happen. So clearly they've got their eye on that goalkeeping division. And that's an area that might need to be upgraded if they're going to challenge for major honours next season. I mean, Moises Caicedo has just gone on to a different level in recent months. And so there'll be a lot of hope around him, and Enzo Fernandez leading them fantastically. And Cole Palmer, we know the quality he possesses despite having a difficult second half of the season. So they've got the weapons to really do something next season on all fronts. They're clearly trying to build out the depth with pretty much 2 strong players in every position. And so they will expect to challenge the likes of Liverpool, Manchester City and Arsenal, no doubt about it, try and make an impact in the Champions League. And they are capable of winning things, it would appear. They've just won the Conference League, of course. And the expectations, the history of Chelsea is a club defined in the modern era by success and silverware. Of course, it's still quite early in the genesis, and they're still gelling and forming a team spirit. But I think a lot of other clubs will be looking at them with a little bit of trepidation when you look at the options they have, especially in that attacking department.
Yep, and they've already banked £76.5 million for reaching the final, a further £7.3 million available if they go on and win it. That will help especially with PSR. Let's shift our focus to the Lionesses' enormous game against the Netherlands on Wednesday evening. Miguel, you've been writing about this. Tell us a bit about your piece.
Yeah, I'm in Switzerland now, which is why I don't have control of the lighting. It's not my house, and hence I look maybe a bit like a vampire on air. But yeah, so I'm in Zurich at the moment. I was at the game on Saturday night and the press conference today with Serena Vieman and Alessia Russo. And I mean, look, even on its own terms, this is absolutely huge. It is really win or bust for England. If they lose, they're out, which has never happened to a defending European champion in the Women's Euros if they go out in the group stage. But of course, even that situation has so many more edges and narratives to it because, I mean, above anything, they're playing the Dutch, who of course, you know, Vieman, before Saturday, she'd never lost. She'd never even drawn a game in this competition, having taken the Dutch to the title in 2017. The current Dutch manager, Jonker, is one of her, I mean, it's probably a stretch to call him a mentor anyway, but he was a formative figure in her development. Her current assistant is actually going to replace the Dutch coach after this tournament. I think some people close to the England setup would actually question whether, I think it's worth a discussion about why the FA is maybe developing a pathway for Dutch coaches more than English coaches in that sense. But obviously then there's all sorts of kind of crossovers between the players. Many of them have played together. The Dutch star Vieman Miedema is in a relationship with Beth Mead, and she was asked about that before the game tomorrow. And it does, yeah, all of it adds, like, just, I suppose, there would be usually so much for the players to consider ahead of a game like this. And certainly, I think the French game was alarming. I think a lot of people around the setup didn't quite expect it, although there had been warning signs. And in the days since, there's been a feeling that maybe the players, having been defending European champions, and after a few changes to the squad, that they were actually a bit more nervous than had been led on, that they felt a lot of the weight. They weren't quite sure of the team. And whereas in the immediate after that game, I think Vieman sensed that, and her first message straight away to a quiet dressing room was, right, we go and win on Wednesday now. And it's a bit strange how a message as simple as that, as well as how the way they ended the game, has suddenly created a situation whereas, at least from speaking to people around the camp, there does feel a bit more clarity, with that aided by the simple fact that they know they just have to win. And I do wonder whether we'll see something a bit closer to the England that got to the final of the World Cup and, of course, won the Euros in 2022. Because I think the end of the game against the French, after what was, I have to say, a poor performance where the tactics didn't work, towards the end of the game, suddenly they went direct. They're playing with much more pace and much more clarity. And I'd expect to see something similar against the Dutch, because if they don't, well, they're out.
Yeah. Lose and, in effect, go home. The Telegraph's treatment, Vieman shuts out criticism ahead of crucial Dutch clash. There has been some criticism, perhaps for the first time in her reign, David. Is this the first time that she sensed real pressure as the England boss?
Yeah, and understandably so when you're the reigning champions, and that performance against France was not expected. It was below par, and the expectation, whether she likes it or not, falls on her as the woman in charge, and some very experienced and high-level players who will have to step up. And you heard Georgia Stanway speaking in the build-up to this match against the Netherlands about how they want to see the real England, you know, a more aggressive approach, front foot, proactive. And you saw that towards the end when England went a bit more direct against France, and they'll want to carry that on. Miggs's piece is really interesting about what was said in the dressing room afterwards, and how single-minded their focus is on this win and upping the levels. Maybe it was the wake-up call that they needed. You know, they've got dangerous players, of course, likes of Russo and Hemp and Mead, as Miggs said, against her partner, and Lauren James, whose performance wasn't quite as good as we've come to expect at the top of that sort of midfield. I'm not sure that experiment or the tactics worked out. But this is the expectation they've set. They've sort of changed the parameters by their own glory, and so they're going to have to stand up in very difficult circumstances. A lot of players they know very well on the Dutch side. A number of them at Manchester City, for example. And so, yeah, it's going to be an evening of huge expectation, and the jeopardy, you know, makes it quite a spectacle. A draw takes the control out of England's hand, and defeat means they're goners, and that would really raise questions about where England go next as well, because that point on the lack of coaches coming through from the English game is one of real concern, and it's something that the FA will want to look at. Of course, Dan Ashworth, whose return to the FA has been out there at the tournament, and the success has been one thing, but now it's about maintaining it, and that makes tomorrow so important.
Yeah, so it was punchy from Sarina Vieman in the press conference. Also, the Eye front page of their sport back page. We've bounced back before, says confident Russo. So the players are sounding pretty confident. They know their task, Miguel.
Yeah, it does feel there has been a bit of a change in tone since before the French match. And again, that's why I say maybe the clarity of the situation helps. But I do think there's another element to the game, actually. And I don't want to kind of lay on more to this team, given like it's such a pressure occasion. But I think there's a very interesting element, because there was a report out on Friday say that viewership for the WSL was down 35%. I think there has been growing financial concerns. And there is almost this element where, I mean, even Euro 2022, say, that was obviously the spark for what has been a situation in women's football that has been constant upward trajectory. But just in the last year, there's maybe been a bit of stagnation. Even Euro 22 was a bit slow burn. I don't think it really started to take off nationally until the quarterfinals. And we're in a similar situation here. And I suppose it's a bit unfortunate in that it's coinciding with, say, Wimbledon, the Lions, and almost another one of these kind of classic summers of sport. But the knockout stages almost have a free run in terms of kind of, potential audiences. So, I mean, I don't want to say they're playing for the future, but I think given that many of these players were responsible for the boom in women's football in England, they're sort of almost in the same situation again, and they're at a point where the game could actually do with them winning this. So it is just an extra element to this.
Yeah. Right. We're going to park it. We'll take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. We've already had a look at Chelsea and João Pedro. And on the left of the Sun's back page, there's news of Marcus Rashford turning up at Manchester United's training ground. But why? That's on the way next. You're watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back to Miguel Delaney, chief football writer at The Independent, and the Athletics football correspondent David Ornstein. Let's get straight back into it, and we'll go to the sidebar in the Sun Sports back page. Marcus Rashford back at training with Manchester United, which to me I find quite strange, David, because my understanding was he'd been told you don't need to report for duty as they tried to move him on.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. Him, Alejandro Garnacho, Anthony, Tyrell Malacia, and Jadon Sancho were all given extra time out to sort their futures. But they were given access still to the medical and rehabilitation facilities. And Rashford appears to have taken advantage of it yesterday and today, despite not being expected there. So he wasn't training with the main group. But clearly this follows on from sort of noises coming from his end that he's sort of going to be 100% professional, as you would expect. And clearly, you know, Manchester United want to move him on, and in that circumstance, he's obviously going to look for employment elsewhere. Barcelona appears to be one that he's been heavily linked with for a while. That you presume would be other options, and certainly, as I understand it, his priority is to continue his career abroad, whether that be permanent sale, loan move, or even a swap deal. So it's going to be one of the interesting narratives as these weeks of the transfer window go on, because Rashford's a very high-level player, and we saw that at Aston Villa in the second half of last season on loan. They didn't take up the option to buy at 40 million, maybe influenced by their lack of Champions League football. We don't know that he would have wanted to go there on a permanent basis with Champions League ambitions himself, and clearly being keen on the idea of going overseas. But it really is not an ideal situation for Manchester United to have this sort of seemingly like a bomb squad that they don't see they see a surplus to requirements. They're not part of Ruben Amorim's plans, but they're still on their books, and United need to get shifting those players. They're going to try and complete the Bryan Mbeumo deal, but they haven't yet. That is their priority, and with told the money is available for that, but afterwards it needs to be sales before they can start to do more business in the market, and those sales aren't materializing yet. I suspect they will, but I'm also sure they'll want to get a move on with it.
Yeah, Martin Blackburn wrote that story in The Sun. He's also written the one above it on The Sun's back page. Jamie Vardy on United radar. I don't know if you've seen this, Miguel, but I want to get your instant reaction that United have been offered 3 free agents. That includes Jamie Vardy, Callum Wilson and Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah, without meaning to kind of impugn the quality of any player, all of the players named have been at certain points of their career, particularly Vardy, obviously, high-quality players. But at this point of their career, to imagine maybe they're going to Manchester United, it does speak to United's difficulties. You know, as David said, yeah, we know the situation. They had basically the budget for Cunha and Mbeumo, and after that, it's about sales. They would want a forward, but to get one in, if they can't make the sales necessary, this is the sort of deal they're looking at. It's a striking situation, really, that kind of, I mean, shows that, I mean, another element, as David kind of referenced there as well, I suppose, is that it illustrates when the entire market basically badly knows you need sales. It makes it all the more difficult to shift players, and hence this sort of noise is created. It's remarkable. I mean, say with the Rashford one, the one thing with that, I mean, I agree with David. I can see him going abroad, and just with some of the noises coming out of Barcelona as well, and how they couldn't get the Nico Williams deal done, who actually ended up staying at Athletic Bilbao, to the surprise of some people in Spain. I do wonder whether that all says that eventually Rashford goes to Barcelona in the very last hours of the transfer window in August.
Yes, well, we shall have to wait and see. David, you've written a really intriguing piece about Manchester United and some cameras that wanted to go behind the scenes at Carrington.
Yeah, they'd been in secret talks with Amazon about one of these all or nothing type series that we've seen with Arsenal, Manchester City and Tottenham, other teams outside of English football as well in different sports. And the talks have been taking place for months, and it was set to be the most Amazon have ever paid for one of these programs, well in excess of £10 million. And that, of course, would have helped Manchester United, given their financial problems, around £700 million in debt, and a couple of sponsorships have been lost, although the word from Old Trafford is that more are coming on board. And if this was so critical, they probably would have gone ahead with it. But ultimately, Ruben Amorim didn't want to do it. He saw it as being a distraction, certainly the timing. And some of the commercial elements weren't right for United either. Ultimately, despite everyone being keen to explore it, they were told they were aligned by the end in deciding against doing it. And so those who were hoping to see what's going on at Manchester United behind the scenes are going to have to be disappointed. They may come back to it in the future, but that ship has sailed for the time being.
Yeah, it's a shame. It would have been good to see what goes on behind the curtain. United are going to make around £6 million in Nottingham Forest's sale of Anthony Elanga to Newcastle United. They'll be pleased with that. This is an intriguing move. Not yet done, but looks like it's well on the way, Miguel.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, that's actually been a little bit of the story of Newcastle's summer, in that it's obviously been quite a slow process. I think to the frustration of many fans, and I suppose they'll be delighted to just get close to a deal like this for one of the Premier League standout players last year. I suppose, I mean, when the controversial Saudi takeover initially happened, we probably had people had different visions of how their transfer recruitment would go. But yeah, obviously there's PSR concerns. Maybe there's been some questions as well about how the recruitment process goes, given that kind of Paul Mitchell, there's been going to be more changes there with him set to leave the club. And it's hard not to feel all of this is kind of fed into what has been another slow summer so far. But I think this is a very significant signing. It's a really good signing. It offers Eddie Howe more pace to that team. And yeah, it's a little bit of a statement after, I suppose, a period where Newcastle supporters in particular have been crying out for a bit of noise.
We've only got about 40 seconds, David, but I wonder whether another Swede in the building keeps Isak at the club for that little bit longer.
Certainly Newcastle fans will hope so. The sale of Alexander Isak is not on the agenda for Newcastle. They want him to stay. They would love him to renew his contract. And so many clubs would, I'm sure, like to sign him. We know of Arsenal's previous interest, Liverpool. I'm sure if the door was open, they would look to try and walk through it. But Newcastle don't intend to open the door. And even if they ever could be tempted to, the price would be extortionate, talk of sort of £150 million. So let's see what he wants to do and when they return to pre-season training and what his mindset is at. But for now, he's definitely there to stay.
Yeah, I can hear Toon fans going, don't mention the sale of Alexander Isak, Chris. So I'll shut my mouth. David, Miguel, thank you for joining us. If you've missed any of the show, there's another chance to see Back Pages tonight at 1:30. And the show is also available as a podcast. Download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, you know the drill, wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, join us again on Wednesday night when our guests will be Riyad Al Samurai and Martin Hardy. Up next, João Pedro started for the first time for Chelsea, sent them into the Club World Cup